Hi, we're Maddie and Nico, and we are turning this empty cargo van into this tiny home on wheels. We have no building experience, but we'll take you along each step as we transform our 2020 Ford Transit van. In this video, we're installing our diesel heater. So Nico just drilled a first small hole kind of on like the edge of where we're planning to cut, so we can go into the van and make sure that everything is lined up properly before we cut the big major hole, because that would be a more difficult hole to patch up if we had to.
So I've drawn out my mounting plate. Now I just need to cut these holes. Instead of individually cutting these holes, I'm just going to use this giant angle grinder and cut a hole about this size. Okay, here's our hole. I just gotta do a quick test fit, see if everything slides right in. So I did test it. The heater fits nice and snug in this hole. All I have to do now is file down the edges of this, give it a paint. Okay, so we got our fuel line in the mail with better connectors. This fuel line is a bit more rigid as well. I'm going to start hooking it up to these ports, and I'm also going to hook up the intake and the exhaust, and then maybe I can drop it in. So step one is putting on this mounting plate. Okay, so next step is the fuel port, which is this little nipple coming out. Like I said, we bought the Webasto kit, which is a little better quality than the Chinese one. I'm just gonna hook that on, like that, and tighten it down. I already tightened this screw so this fuel line won't come out. Sorry about the leaf blower. There's always a leaf blower around this town. Give it a nice pull to make sure it doesn't come loose, and it does not. Now, if you're confused on which one's the exhaust and which one's the intake, there's a little lip inside of the intake manifold, and the exhaust manifold does not have that same lip. So that's one way to tell. Like I said, this one's the intake, and I have my hose. Gotta jam it down so it's nice and flush on the bottom. Take the hose clamp that I already put on. Nice and tight, so it can't come off. So this is the exhaust going on. Make sure you have your clamp on before you put it on. So this one's not sitting all the way flush, but I think it's all right as long as I can get this clamp nice and tight. That's everything on right there. So now I think I can just drop it through the hole. I just traced the outline of this. I redid it because it had to shift a little bit this way. I have this high temp RTV. It's basically a silicone that's heat resistant, and I'm gonna put it around my Sharpie line. It'll basically create a gasket so fumes or water or whatever can't get in. So here's the RTV silicone. There's a little divot right here. I just put a bunch of extra so it kind of fills up that gap. I'm gonna put this down on there now. Okay, now I'm gonna take these self-tapping screws they provided and screw it in. Here we are under the van. I have my exhaust pipe hanging down. I kind of want it to just come right about here, so that way it comes out from under the van. Ours came with this muffler, and if I put it on the end, it sticks out way too far, like that. So what I'm thinking of doing is taking it, cutting the pipe about up here, putting the muffler in line right about here, and then connecting the piece that I cut off so it comes out right where I was planning, I don't really know how to mount it yet, but we will figure that out. I don't really recommend cutting your tube because I just spent the last 2 hours trying to get this muffler on. I thought that this coil would mount up nicely to the muffler, just like this piece, but the end of it, the flat part, is a bit wider. So I spent the last hour or two pounding out this metal, and I actually had to take this whole exhaust pipe off the van.
That means I had to take it off because I've got small hands.
She did it because I couldn't. So now she's gonna have to stick it back on the exhaust outlet, which is super tight. So yeah, if you do plan on doing this, either do it all before and have your piece like this.
Just order 2 separate parts. You can get these pipes in different lengths. So if you really want your muffler in the middle, then just order 2 different length pipes. They're not that expensive.
So this pipe is just a tiny bit smaller than our muffler, so I'm just trying to widen it out. Got a pair of pliers and I'm just kind of trying to stretch the metal out just a tiny bit. Is it just enough? Really, it should be the flatter side, like this instead of this, but this part is way too big for our muffler. So I think I'm just gonna, like, this is pretty much on there and won't come off even without a clamp. I think I'm just gonna clamp it, and then I'm gonna use more of this high temp RTV. It says it's a gasket maker, and that's kind of what we're making, so hopefully it works. What I'm gonna do is just take my RTV and put a ring up in here. So I know it kind of looks like there's a lot in there, but we're gonna end up kind of squishing it back. So I think it'll be fine. Lastly, I'm just gonna put a bead around the edge of this too, just to be safe. Now just putting my hose clamp on. Okay, so that side's done. Just gonna do the same to this other side. Got that. Okay, here I am under the van. Finally got our exhaust mounted up to the heater. Now I'm just running this exhaust line out from under the van. One thing to make sure to do is have this exhaust pipe at a gradual downhill, because you want your lowest point to be the end of it so any water can get out. We also bought this exhaust. It's not a Chinese one, it's actually from Webasto. It has a little vent down here so moisture can get out. But this is how I'm routing it. I'm gonna use a self-tapping screw into this little metal bracket, and I have some exhaust pipe clamps that I can clamp up here if I need, but I'm gonna mount this first. There we go.
The exhaust pipe is done.
Thank God.
We are drilling a hole for our hot air duct in the middle of the base of the seat.
Paint the hole I just cut. I just got this air duct on. In hindsight, it'd be a lot easier to put this on and then put your heater down in, but I made it work, so I guess either way works. Just gonna attach my hose clamp. Next step is mounting this piece, which is the piece that this thing sits on so you can direct air. I don't have any self-tapping screws, but I think I'm just gonna use the screws I have and just drill holes and then screw it in.
So what I'm gonna do now is cut the wires that came with the diesel heater and attach our 10 gauge wire that I ran previously to that. So this end has a fuse on it, and you could actually take the fuse out and save it for later. You will want to fuse this wire. We're gonna connect this to our fuse block over by our battery bank. Now that I have stripped the wires, I'm gonna connect them with this butt splice connector. Just gonna trim these down a little bit, but basically you put this end in and then you crimp it. Today we've been working on routing the cord that goes between our heater control panel and our heater itself. I didn't see a lot of videos online going into great detail about this sort of thing, so I thought we would explain how we did this. We have routed the control panel wire from the cluster. It comes out underneath our seat here and goes underneath this plastic thing, which we didn't take fully off. We just unconnected a few of these plastic tabs here. Then the wire goes back into here. We use a zip tie here just to keep it over on this side. We just don't want anything getting in the way of the seat belt mechanism. As you can see, there's already factory wires in here and they have these nice clips to kind of keep it out of the way. So we just used a zip tie through this outside hole here. And we used this fish tape perhaps. We came in with that from the top, which I'll show you in a minute, and fished it all the way down and then taped our wire that we needed to that and then pulled it back up through here. The wire goes along the side here, behind this metal piece. Behind this piece, we took part of this off. We didn't have a large enough Torx bit to undo that, so we just left it on. It just gave us enough space here to really get the top part off and see what we're doing here. There is a hole back here, which we put a rubber grommet on that just to keep the wire from rubbing up on anything sharp. And then we also, in this plastic bit, if you could see that, we drilled a little bit more space on this plastic thing so our wire will come out of here just like that, because otherwise this plastic bit would be pressing up against the wire and the metal frame here. So now we're about to put it all back together. This wire at the top will come across underneath our blob thing over here to this control panel here, which connects via whatever kind of connection that is there.
So today I am figuring out how to step down our fuel line, as it starts at 3/8 of an inch down to 2 millimeters. I think I've got all the parts to do it, and I'll show you what I've got. So here's our marine fuel tank. It came with a threaded outlet here, so that's what we're using. I bought this quick release so we can just easily take it out from under the van like that, and then our hose is disconnected. We'll take it to the pump and fill it up, and then we can just reconnect it. So there's the threaded part of this valve. It comes in 2 pieces, so each piece was like 10 bucks at West Marine. You could probably get it off Amazon too. So one side is threaded, which will go into the gas tank itself. And then there's a 3/8 barbed fitting that fits over this hose. This hose is a 1/4 inch fuel line hose. Picked it up at O'Reilly's. So from here I am gonna cut this a little bit, but just for this video, I'm just showing you all the parts. This is our fuel filter that came with the diesel heater. That's gonna come in, filter through the filter, and then out to this green fuel line. This fuel line came with the heater as well. We were told not to really use it. We heard that this can crack and break over time, so we're just using a little piece of it. It's basically, this has to go down to a 2mm nylon fuel line that we purchased. So this is what comes up and into the heater. This green line will then attach to the fuel pump, and then right here I have a 3/16 section of a fuel line, and then a little tiny piece of the green fuel line to shove in there to make this a little wider because it didn't really fit that well. I'm gonna use one of these fuel clamps here and here, and then this will go up into the heater. And I have a assortment of fuel line clamps. They're all stainless steel because they are going to be under our car. Here we are underneath the passenger side of the van. Got my gas tank up on a crate right now, kind of positioned where I think it's going to be. Got our hose coming out. Here's our fuel pump. We're thinking about suspending it with a zip tie to lessen the noise. So I just have to cut this, attach my fuel filter about here, and then run the green line up into this. This fuel pump needs to be at a 20 to 30 degree angle, facing up towards the heater like that. That's more exaggerated, but you get the picture. Then this fuel line will actually be from the heater, this one, and we're trying not to create a high point, so if there are bubbles they could eventually make their way up and out through the heater. So we're thinking of taking this line kind of along this frame like this, and then in there. This little nylon 2mm tube is too small and it's rigid, and it won't go on this fuel pump. So what I'm going to do is I have a little piece of this green tubing, and this fits pretty nicely over the nylon, so it'll make it a little bit wider. So once this is on, I'm going to shove it into this 3/16 fuel line. This end of this will fit nicely over here. Imagine this is on this right here. This piece will go up into this like that. So it creates a nice seal right up in here. So we have our fuel line coming up, up through the frame, up and into the heater right up there. And then this fuel line section and this, and probably this, is going to be wrapped in some heat wrap because it is pretty close to the actual exhaust of the car. Here's my heat wrap. Just gonna put my tubing into.
Alright, so we're getting ready to prime our fuel line. Our pump does have a prime feature, but I hear that it's better to actually prime the line up to the fuel pump manually, just so the pump is not working so hard pushing air, because it's not really meant to do that.
Here it comes.
Here comes the diesel. Alright, so we powered it on now. Oh my god, it sounds like a fucking inferno.
Yeah, so I'm guessing why it's going like there's still air in the lines. So
Now it's pumping faster. It honestly is so scary to me.
warm.
Is it warm air? Oh, we did it, Luce. I'm getting smoked out. This is a terrible location for this exhaust. To mount our diesel tank under the van, we got inspiration from a hinging system like the one shown here. We used some scrap angled steel, the same steel that we used for our bed frame, to create a shallow box to hold our tank. Thanks to my dad's friend Chuck for helping us weld the pieces together.
Okay, we're under the car. So my idea is to take some of this angled steel and attach it like that with some riv nuts. Okay, so I'll just drill into this piece right here and then attach some riv nuts about here and here. Attach that frame piece in, and then I have this piece that has a hinge hook on the bottom. I'm going to attach that to the piece that's going to go here, and attach that here, and then one on this side. This will be hanging down from the frame. I have this piece. This slides in, and this piece that is the actual hinge is going to be attached to the back like that. First step is drilling a hole in this angled steel. So now I'm just marking my holes that I need to drill in the frame. Right there and there. Should be good. I'm just taking an awl. I can center punch these. So as you saw, I had to cut some length off the tops of these, and I cut a little bit off the sides of these pin parts. So now both of these will fit on the frame. I also drilled a second hole, so when we bolt it, it has no chance of going like that because there's two holes. Okay, so I'm just marking where I need to drill holes. And do one here, and then for this bottom frame, here. And okay, now I'm just gonna mount these to my metal frame. It is the next day of building our diesel tank holder. This is what I have so far. If you don't know already, I've been really struggling with this and it's taken way too long. And I think today might be the last day we're working on it. So hopefully this gets mounted today.
In the front of the diesel tank frame, we attached a loop and a cable to hold the tank up in place. We'll go over this more in a little bit.
What we're doing today is putting our diesel pump into a waterproof box. We were camping in Yosemite not too long ago, and we did notice you could hear the pump tick. Not only will this box waterproof this pump, it will also, I'm gonna stuff it full of leftover Thinsulate so it soundproofs it a little bit more, and then we're gonna hang that off the frame. So here is the finished product. We've been using the heater for about a year on and off. It is the middle of winter right now, and we have been out in Salt Lake City and Park City, and it has worked just fine. Keeps us nice and warm. Anyways, I just wanted to show you how it actually functions. There are a couple things I changed in the video. This green line was pretty short, but we did lengthen it so that when we take this down, the green line wouldn't be pulled so hard. So that's one thing we changed. And then I added these links from a chain. There's this big one here, which makes it easier to use our carabiner. And let me show you how it actually all works. So to undo it, I just have to push up a little bit and undo this carabiner. So it can swing down. Make sure my green line doesn't get pinched. It just falls down like this. I can take out the tank from here, fill it up with the pump, and then to put it back in, it's just the opposite. Feed this through the loop up here. You pull it nice and tight. And you hook it back in. So it's pretty easy. One thing I don't like about it is when it's wet out, like in Tahoe in the wintertime, the gas station lots can be pretty gross and getting under the car is not that fun. I guess I would just need to get a tarp to make it a little better for me. Other than that, it works just fine. And one thing that I didn't really go over in the video either is the front part of this system. It's that stainless steel cable attached to the carabiner, which hooks into that chain link. The top pieces are made out of stainless steel, so that's why they're not painted, and they are just rib nutted into the frame of the van.
Hello from the future. This is the lessons learned section of the video where we go over everything we learned in the process of this part of the build, as well as anything we've learned since we installed our heater. We are in Colorado right now, so it's the perfect time to talk about our heater and how it's been working. We actually just had our first negative temperature night in the van. So without further ado, here are our lessons learned.
It was warm in the van when it was negative, by the way. Okay, first lesson learned is when you buy a Chinese diesel heater, I would recommend testing it before you drill your holes and put it in the van. I mean, if you look at Amazon reviews, some people say it doesn't even work the first time, and other people say that they got shipped a secondhand one basically, so it wasn't new. I would recommend just even taking it apart and looking at the burn chamber. So if it's sooted, you know it's not new, and either you could return it or just clean it.
Our next tip is to make sure that you have the proper sized wire running to your heater. These heaters are very sensitive to voltage drop, so you want to have as high voltage as possible at the heater itself. So you don't want to use the included wire. You saw in our video we cut that wire down. It would have been better maybe even to cut that wire closer to the heater if possible. Cut that wire as close to the heater and then connect it to a thicker wire. Ours is 10 gauge, which is our thickest wire of most of our 12-volt appliances in the van.
So in the exhaust part of the video, you saw me putting the high temp RTV, which is the gasket maker, the orange stuff. You saw me using into the actual exhaust to make seals on the muffler and all the pipes. We read after the fact that we shouldn't do that because it can cause early sooting and create blockage in the system. So maybe don't do that and just trust that your hose clamps are gonna work.
Next tip is that if you are ever taking your van up to a higher altitude destination, like how we are in Colorado right now, you will need to adjust your settings for altitude, and that's to have a better air to fuel ratio so that your heater burns clean. On that same note, it's a good idea to also add kerosene, or you can fully run your heater on kerosene if that's in your budget. Kerosene is a lot more expensive than diesel, so we just do a part mixture when we're up at altitude. And that's because diesel has a high freezing point, so it can become a little bit slushy in the line. So those are just a couple tips for altitude. I'm not going to go into too much detail on the settings. We can make another video on how to adjust your heater's altitude settings if that is of interest.
So if you'd like that, comment down below. As you saw in the video, it is kind of a hassle to pump diesel into our tank. Just getting under the car and having to deal with that every time isn't that enjoyable. It's actually super efficient, so if it's not super cold, it'll last us over a week. With that being said, I think maybe in the summertime, one of the projects that I would like to tackle is changing our whole diesel tank system I've seen people use fuel cells mounted on the driver's side of the van, and they make it so they run a tube up to where you pump gas, and right below the gas hole there's now a diesel hole, so you can just pull up and pump and then be done. You don't have to get under the van, you don't have to do anything. It'd just be better.
If we do change out our fueling system for the diesel heater, we will make a video on that and we'll document that whole process for you all, so stay tuned. Our diesel heater from the very beginning has struggled to start up. As you saw in the video, there was a bunch of white smoke coming out of the exhaust pipe when we started the heater. That pretty much happens every single time, and we've used the heater dozens of times now. And sometimes we get an error 10 when we're trying to start, which could mean a couple things, as these error codes often do. We think that there is not enough air getting into the ignition chamber. So I've seen some videos of people taking apart the heater and finding that a small little hole to the ignition chamber can be blocked by this mesh screen. So that might be the reason. Other things that you can look into if you're getting this error is you can see if you're getting enough voltage at the heater at startup, if your glow plug is getting hot enough. Some people just replace the glow plug. It's an easy fix. We do plan to take apart the heater pretty soon here just to get this kind of diagnosed and figure out, because we don't want to be without a heater, especially on some of these cold nights out here in Colorado.
That's another reason to test your heater before you put it in. If you have swivel seats in your van, getting to the heater under the seat is not that easy. Our holes didn't line up for the swivel seats, so it's just kind of a pain to get under there. So that's why we haven't done it.
Check out our swivel seat video to see how the holes don't align on the passenger seat, and that kind of explains why it's such a hassle to get under there, which is unfortunate because, you know, I do see us needing to get under there and change out the heater or service it maybe a couple of times in the lifetime of this van. So anyways, that's everything. Thank you so much for watching this video. I know it was a long one and we really wanted to provide as much detail as possible. So if you found it helpful, please leave us a comment below and give this video a like. And if you aren't already subscribed to our channel, hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. And we will see you next Sunday.